A few years ago, Edith and I and Darren Hirschberger went to Mexico to make a presentation about the Open Hands Savings Group program to a group of Tarahumara uh, indigenous people there that live in the Copper Canyon. We traveled by train from Choice, close to Choice, Mexico, up to Creel. A beautiful train ride through some of the beautiful scenery along the Copper Canyon. Just an uh, amazing landscape and just an amazing train ride. We got to Creel. We spent the night there with the Albert Oberholt family, and then the next morning we headed into the Copper Canyon. To get to the village where the Tarahumara were living, we had to walk about 3 hours or so to get to the village. We could drive part of the way. We drove on the main road, and then we got off the main road, and then we got on more of a gravel road, and then we got on a little, uh, it was almost a road that we drove on. At one place, the switchbacks were so sharp that we couldn't get around the corner with the truck. So when we got to the corner, we pulled straight ahead, and then we backed down to the next corner, the next switchback curve, and then drove down from there. So that gives you an idea of the kind of terrain we were in. Finally, we got as far as we could drive, and then we each had backpacks with 20, 30 pounds of supplies in our backpacks because we were going to be staying in the canyon for a couple of days, and we needed to pack in food and bottled water and our clothing and whatever we needed for a couple of days stay in the Tarahumara village in the canyon. So we put on a backpack and started walking down. There was a stream a river that went down through there. It wasn't really a river; it was more of just a brook or a stream, creek that went down through. We were following that, and the trail would cross over that stream. I forget, it was something like 14 times that we crossed the stream, and most of the places the stream would be 10 or 12 feet wide, and we would be walking across on rocks, which were not always dry, and so it was kind of a challenge to do that. And for me, I'm not used to walking with uh, 20 or 30 pounds on my back, so keeping my balance was a little different. And partway down, I got like a walking stick, and that helped because I could steady myself some with that going across the stream. As we got down close to the village, we were getting down toward that end. There was one place where there was kind of a pool in the creek, and the water was a little deeper there. And there was a bridge across that pool. It had a log on each side, and then there were boards nailed across as cross pieces across between the two logs. The problem was that the log on the one side had broken, so some of the boards were nailed on the one side, but the other side was just kind of dangling. And the other said, well, they're going to walk downstream a little bit and go across where it's not so deep and go across on the rocks. And I had had about enough of going across rocks. I just knew I was going to slip and fall and wind up in the creek on my back and soak everything in my backpack. And so I said, I think I'll try and go across the bridge. I think I can make it. And they were saying, I don't think so. I don't think you can do that. And I said, yeah, I can. I can do it. No problem. And so I started across, and I got about halfway across, and I stepped on one of the boards, cross boards that was loose on the one side, and for some reason it slid, and I lost my footing and went down through between the two logs that were cross pieces. Uh, Fortunately, with the backpack on my back and my belly in the front, I didn't fit between the two logs. So there I was, just kind of dangling over the stream. I never got wet, but I crawled up. I sort of lost my dignity, though. It didn't. I'm sure it didn't look very graceful. It didn't look very, very strong. And so I crawled up and got across the rest of the bridge, and we got down to the village. It was a very interesting village, different than anywhere I had ever been, and a different presentation than I ever gave anywhere else. Because one of the things that was interesting there was when I asked the people, what should you save money for? What do you need money for? They didn't really know what they needed money for. And so I gave them some suggestions. Well, what about for a wedding? Like when somebody is getting married, do you need um, money to have a feast and have a wedding? And they're like, not really. No, we get married. We just, in a church service, we just have the couple exchange their vows, and but we don't really have a feast or anything. It's no, it doesn't really cost anything to get married. Saying, well, what about land or a house? And we might need a few nails, but we can just set up here on the land we have and we use, and we cut some boards and we can make a house. It doesn't cost money, a lot of money to make a house. And you say, well, what about a funeral? What about when somebody dies? Don't you need like a coffin? And do you have a feast then? Just when someone dies, and they're like, not really. You say we might need to buy a few nails, but we just cut some boards and yeah, we nail together a coffin and we bury them. And but we don't have a meal with that or anything. It's not. We don't. Yeah, it doesn't cost a lot of money when someone dies. So what about school? Well, the government provides school. What about healthcare? Well, the government provides healthcare. And so it was different. But some of the women said, we need money for kettles. We want to buy kettles to cook in, and we need money for fabric because we make all our own clothing. So they were making all the clothing for their husbands, their children, for themselves, and so we finally decided, the thing they need money for is to buy kettles and to buy fabric to make clothing. And so um, they had a long discussion, and they decided that they would start a savings group to save money for those things. And then, of course, we had to walk back out. And I was saying to one of the men that lived there, I was saying, if I lived here, I wouldn't be carrying all this stuff in and out. I'd get myself a donkey and I'd have a donkey carry the things in and out. Oh, he said, donkeys are more trouble than they're worth. He said, I have three donkeys, but I can never find them. They're just wandering around here somewhere. I have no idea where they are. Till I find my donkeys, I could be out to town and halfway back. And so a donkey's more trouble than what it's worth. Um, the other thing that was interesting there in that village is that they loved to play volleyball. Volleyball was a big thing for them, and so after every gathering, after every service they had at the church or whatever, they would play volleyball. And the ladies carried their babies on a strip of fabric, kind of slung on their back, and they would play volleyball with their babies on their back, and all they'd swing and hit the ball, and the baby would swing, but they were fine, and they had a good time. I was helping them play volleyball, and one of the young girls hit the volleyball, and it came over, and I wasn't paying attention, I guess, and it came over and hit me on the head or somewhere, hit me somewhere, and oh, they were worried. But I was fine. There was no problem, and then we were playing, and then I noticed that this girl was sitting off to the side, and then um, I said something to her about whether she wanted to play, but she didn't. And then the pastor said to me, um, "Probably you should tell her it's okay. Like she feels bad because she hit the ball that hit you, and so probably you should tell her that it's okay, and she feels bad because she hit the pastor with a ball." So I told her, hey, no problem. It's okay. You don't have to worry about that. And then she came back in and played. But every place is a different place, and uh, every community has its unique things about it. And so one of the things about traveling is that you get to see a lot of unique things. You get to see a lot of different ways of doing things and different practices in different communities. And also, when you go to those places, if somebody says you probably shouldn't walk across that bridge, maybe it'd be a good idea not to walk across the bridge and to walk across the stream instead.